Welcome back to Paul's Tech News. It has been a week of healing and recovery in the world of PC hardware as a brief respite in NVIDIA's RTX 50 series launch blitz 2025 has given many of us a moment to rest, pretty much for the first time this year. Time to reflect and gain some perspective on all the ways the 5080 and 5090 launch went wrong, somehow managing to funnel all that global hype into a bucket of impotent rage and frustration, thanks to stagnant performance per dollar gains versus last gen, and then for those who could stomach that disappointment and still wanted to buy in, a widespread lack of availability that seems far worse than past launches. And don't look for the situation to improve anytime soon, with looming tariffs threatening to further increase prices and a nebulous rash of RTX 5090s and 5090Ds failing to worry about. Perhaps the best aspect of all this, if we're looking for silver linings, is that it makes it that much easier to just dismiss the 50 series and stop worrying about it, emptying oneself of desire and dreams, of pleasure and sorrow, and remembering that time and change are the only true constants. I think I'll read Siddhartha again. It's probably going to be the only way to make it through 2025. But for now, I hope that you are enlightened by this week's tech news.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by Thermaltake's The Tower 600 series cases, continuing their popular lineup of vertical body design solutions with more room than ever for high-end PC builds. With support for full-size ATX motherboards with hidden connectors, side radiator mounts with room for 360 and 420mm AIOs, a dual-mode GPU mounting system, and vented side panels that easily pop off for access to cable management or the 13 fan mounts, the Tower 600 is both easy to build in and distinct in its design. There's an optional display stand and LCD panel too. For more on the Tower 600 series cases from Thermaltake, click the sponsor link in the video description. I make a conscious effort to stick to the tech side of hardware news each week, but there are times when the broader topics of geopolitics and trade relations cannot be ignored, as represented by this WCCF Tech article: NVIDIA, AI, DeepSeek, TSMC, and the implementation of tariffs by the Trump administration are all closely connected and will undoubtedly impact the pricing and availability of consumer GPUs for gaming. In fact, it seems that that is already happening, as price adjustments have been made to RTX 5080s and 5090s on the official MSI and ASUS stores within 1 week of the official launch. MSI 50 series prices have increased by between $140 and $500, and ASUS now lists their flagship ROG Astral 5090 for $3,410, just a modest $1,400 or so markup over the $2,000 base MSRP. That's like the price of a 5090 and a 5080, but you just don't get the 5080. As of Tuesday, the US government has imposed a 10% tariff on imports from China, after waffling and backing down on the proposed 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, which have been delayed for a month. China responded immediately by imposing their own tariffs on products like coal, natural gas, and crude oil. But for the tech sector, the greater concern might be export restrictions China is placing on raw materials like tungsten, tellurium, bismuth, molybdenum, and indium, which are used in semiconductor manufacturing. And TSMC in Taiwan is still waiting to hear how chip-specific tariffs will play out, which could go into effect February 18th. They had planned to increase their prices 5 to 10%, but are now considering 15% or more. My frustration in just attempting to sum up all these goings-on has been inconsistency, though. How to discern political posturing and bluster from legitimate plans to enact some impactful trade policy which can turn on a dime, it would seem, like when TikTok was going to be banned, but then it wasn't. Or the aforementioned Canada and Mexico tariffs that were delayed in the 11th hour. USPS just stopped accepting packages from China completely earlier this week, which was a big deal, but then, never mind, they resumed again Wednesday. Your AliExpress order is back on track. But bringing all this back around to GPU prices, consistency is the friend of commerce, and inconsistency is not. The chip makers, raw material suppliers, and board partners will not be shouldering the cost of tariffs in 2025. It will be passed on to consumers, and as you can see here, it's already happening. It's worth noting that these price hikes weren't necessarily made as a reaction to tariffs. Prices were raised in anticipation of them because businesses want to get out in front of these things, and right now it's easy to do under the guise of limited supply and aligning with scalper-fueled street pricing. And if NVIDIA's timing for the 50 series seemed bad, and many believed they should have waited until more cards were ready, well, this was likely part of the reason too. Launch before the tariffs, and then you can blame price hikes on them afterwards. even if you're adding your own comfy padding to your MSRP increases, like a 10% tariff on your $1,000 RTX 5080 MSI. That should make it $1,100, right? Oh, the tariff was 10%, the price increase was more like 15%. Don't worry, PC gamers will pay. They always do. If only there was some gross representation of board manufacturers believing their cards have outsized value, like a gold-plated version of the most ridiculously overpriced card on the market. Ah, gold-plated ROG Astral. Well played, Asus. Way to read the room. Of course, these days an NVIDIA launch would not be the same without some fear, some danger, the risk that your $2,000 or more likely $2,500 plus RTX 5090 will simply die and stop working. The 12v2x6 connector seems to be holding up for the most part, thankfully, but simply installing the wrong driver could brick your GPU, according to reports. To sum up, multiple 5090D cards from China, and to a lesser extent 5090s, have experienced black screens or have had their GPU become undetected and unusable after installing NVIDIA's launch driver 572.16 that was made available when the cards went up for sale on January 30th. This actually sounds similar to the issues that I experienced when I was first testing the 5090 on my original test bed with the review driver, but let's talk solutions for the 3 or 4 of you who are watching and actually have a 5090. The root cause is not known, but it could be related to PCIe Gen 5, as forcing your motherboard to Gen 4 mode is a possible fix that has worked for some users, as demonstrated by Derbauer. For now, the best advice is to use NVIDIA's updated hotfix driver version 572.24, which was made available Tuesday to correct some game crashes. The RTX 40 series had some driver teething issues at launch as well, so hopefully NVIDIA can correct the issue via software or firmware updates. For now, non-RTX 5090 owners can enjoy a healthy dose of schadenfreude, and let's all remind ourselves that a bricked piece of hardware is supposed to be completely dead and unrecoverable. I'm not sure the term was being accurately used in many of these reports, as recovery via a driver wipe and reinstallation or the PCIe Gen 4 switch has worked in some cases. And now another update on the thing that still gives PC gamers hope. For now, the Radeon RX 9070 and RX 9070 XT launch, whose timeline is gradually becoming more clear. An earlier rumor of a March 23rd launch seems to be incorrect, as Unico's hardware, no relation, has revealed that they think the launch date will be March 6th, per an anonymous but reliable source. So still a rumor for now. This followed a statement made by AMD CEO Dr. Lisa Su in a Q4 2024 earnings call Tuesday, where she said Radeon 9070 GPUs go on sale in early March. That seems to line up. And another rumor sourced from BenchLife indicates that there will be a press event in late February to share details about the RDNA 4-based cards with media outlets. And that's pretty much where we're at. Videocards.com has rumored specs versus the 5070 and 5070 Ti here, and both cards are confirmed to have 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM. Will we hear anything else between now and March though? Maybe. Not to put too fine a point on it, but AMD marketing lead Frank Azor says more details are coming soon. Speaking of coming soon, that's what tech briefs are all about. Rapid deployment. We know NVIDIA has a 5070 and 5070 Ti waiting in the wings, expected in February, but what about after that? Well, the good news is that the 50 series train will keep rolling in March, apparently with a 5060 and 5060 Ti on offer, per rumors sourced from media outlets in China. Also good news is that they'll apparently use standard 8-pin PEG connectors rather than 12v2x6, which is very unnecessary at lower power levels, although the 5060 still might require a 650 watt power supply. News gets less good from there though. It sounds like the 5060 Ti might have 2 variants, an 8GB and a 16GB model, and the discussed pricing, converted to USD, starts at $355 or so for the 5060 and $455 for the 5060 Ti. Woof. And not that I'd recommend it, but the 4060 likely won't be a budget alternative versus the 5060 because NVIDIA stopped making those so they could make the 50 series GPUs on the same 4N node, which means 4060 supply will start to taper off between now and the 5060 launch, just as NVIDIA planned all along. Speaking of disappointing product launches, Intel's Core Ultra CPUs flopped pretty hard when they came out in late 2024, and for good reason, but those expecting Intel to have another line of desktop CPUs in the pipeline for 2025 should adjust those expectations. Their follow-up to Arrow Lake is codenamed Nova Lake, and is a new microarchitecture, but per Michelle Holthaus of Thanks Steve fame, 2026 is when we should expect CPUs based on that design to land. That doesn't rule out an Arrow Lake refresh series coming out sometime in the interim, but warmed over Core Ultra leftovers don't exactly sound like the competition that is needed to keep AMD honest with their 9800X 3D pricing. Finally, we bid farewell to another stalwart source of PC building advice over the years, the EVGA forums, which closed down this week, or actually switched to read-only mode, like an overstressed SSD, with this final message encouraging users to head on over to Reddit for continued nostalgic posts about how EVGA used to be the best, and speculating that they might return to the GPU market at some point to save us all from NVIDIA's greed, etc., until the end of time. EVGA still makes power supplies and stuff, but rip to the EVGA forums. You will be missed. But there you have it, guys, tech news for the week, and if you liked it, click that like button or leave me a comment down below. While you're down there, all of the articles I talked about today are linked in the video's description if you're interested in reading more, and you can check out my store at paulshardware.net for high quality merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, and lots of other cool stuff. Subscribing to my channel is always a good call too. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next week.